When the security guard reached for his radio after seeing a black woman in a business suit, he had no idea she owned every brick in the building he was about to escort her from. What happened in the next 24 hours didn't just destroy careers, and it exposed how the most powerful people in the room are often the ones everyone thinks don't belong. There, the marble floors of Whitmore and Associates gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each footstep echoing through corridors lined with mahogany panels and portraits of stern-faced partners. The scent of expensive leather and fresh flowers from the lobby's elaborate arrangements filled the air. Outside, rain drummed against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown's financial district. Angela walked through the glass doors at exactly 9 a.m., her black Armani suit impeccable, her burgundy leather briefcase catching the morning light. She moved with quiet confidence, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished stone. This was her monthly ritual, observing, listening, learning. But today felt different. The receptionist, a blonde woman in her 20s with perfectly manicured nails, looked up with practiced politeness that quickly shifted to confusion, then barely concealed disdain. "Excuse me, miss. Are you looking for the cleaning service entrance? That's around back." Angela paused, her hand still on the glass door. "I'm here for the 9 a.m. meeting. I'm sorry, but I don't see any service appointments scheduled for this morning." The receptionist's voice carried that particular tone reserved for people she deemed beneath her notice. "The partners are expecting very important clients today. Perhaps you could come back later." 3 junior associates in expensive suits brushed past Angela as if she were invisible, their conversation peppered with legal jargon and weekend sailing plans. One actually stepped around her with an exaggerated sigh, as if she were an inconvenient piece of furniture. "There must be some mistake," Angela said softly, her voice steady despite the familiar sting of assumption. "I believe Mr. Whitmore is expecting me." The receptionist's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Mr. Whitmore doesn't meet with... Well, he's very selective about his appointments. Are you sure you have the right building? The employment office is 6 blocks down." Angela noticed how conversations had quieted in the lobby. Partners and associates were stealing glances, some whispering behind perfectly cupped hands. The security guard had moved closer, his hand resting casually on his radio. "Perhaps I should speak with someone else," Angela suggested, her composure never wavering. "Look, I'm trying to be nice here," the receptionist hissed, leaning forward conspiratorially. "This is a very prestigious firm. We serve Fortune 500 companies, tech giants, oil conglomerates. I don't know what you think you're doing here. But she thinks she belongs here." The voice belonged to James Whitmore III, senior partner, as he descended the curved staircase like he was making a grand entrance. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit custom-tailored, his Princeton ring catching the light. How amusing. More partners had gathered now, forming a loose circle of expensive suits and entitled smirks. Angela counted 8 of them, the entire senior leadership of one of the city's most powerful law firms. Their combined wealth could buy small countries. "Mr. Whitmore," Angela began, but he cut her off with a wave of his manicured hand. "Miss, I don't know what fantasy you're living in, but this is a serious place of business. We don't have time for whatever social media stunt or activist theater you're planning." His voice dripped with condescension. "Security can show you to the service exit if you're confused about directions." The lobby had fallen completely silent now. Even the elevator music seemed to pause. Angela stood in the center of it all, surrounded by marble and malice, by privilege and prejudice. Her briefcase felt heavier in her hand. She looked around the room slowly, taking in each face, memorizing each smirk, each dismissive glance. These men, and they were almost all men, had no idea what they had just done. They couldn't see past her skin color to notice the Cartier watch on her wrist, the custom Italian leather of her shoes, the quiet confidence that comes from building empires. "I see," Angela said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "I understand perfectly now." She turned toward the door, her movement deliberate and controlled. But instead of leaving, she paused, her hand resting on the brass handle. A small smile played at the corners of her lips, not bitter, not angry, but something far more dangerous, something knowing. "Gentlemen," she said without turning around, her voice carrying clearly through the marble acoustics, "I want you to remember this moment. Every single detail. Because in about 24 hours, you're going to wish you had treated me very, very differently." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like thunder. What they didn't know was that Angela Chen owned the building they were standing in. What they couldn't have imagined was that she controlled their biggest clients, their largest contracts, their very survival. And with just one phone call, she was about to show them exactly what happens when you mistake quiet power for powerlessness, because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks doesn't belong there. Before we dive deeper into Angela's incredible story of justice and redemption, I need to ask you something. If you're watching this and thinking about all the times you've been underestimated or dismissed because of how you look, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is dedicated to sharing these powerful stories of triumph over prejudice, and your support helps us reach more people who need to hear them. On a scale of 0 to 10, how angry does this kind of treatment make you? Drop your number in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know how these stories affect you personally. And here's what I really want to know. Have you ever been in a situation where someone completely misjudged your capabilities? Share your story below, because our community learns from each other's experiences. Now let's find out exactly who Angela Chen really is, and why these lawyers just made the biggest mistake of their professional lives. Angela Chen had built her empire quietly, methodically, and almost invisibly. For 12 years, she had been the silent force behind Chen Holdings, a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring struggling companies and transforming them into industry leaders. Her portfolio read like a who's who of corporate America: tech startups that became billion-dollar giants, manufacturing companies that revolutionized their sectors, and yes, law firms that served the most powerful clients in the world. But Angela preferred the shadows. While other CEOs graced magazine covers and gave TED Talks, she worked behind the scenes, letting her results speak louder than her presence. Her office, on the 42nd floor of the building that housed Whitmore and Associates, offered a bird's-eye view of the legal firm she had quietly acquired 18 months earlier. She knew every partner's name, every major case, every client relationship. She had studied their financials with the precision of a surgeon, understanding exactly how vulnerable they were beneath their polished exterior. Whitmore and Associates looked impressive with their marble lobby and mahogany offices, but Angela knew the truth. They were hemorrhaging money, losing clients, and surviving on reputation alone. Her monthly visits to the building weren't random. Angela believed in seeing her investments firsthand, in understanding the culture and character of the companies she owned. She would walk through different floors, observe interactions, listen to conversations. It was her way of taking the pulse of her holdings. What she consistently observed at Whitmore and Associates disturbed her. She watched them dismiss talented young lawyers who didn't fit their narrow demographic. She heard partners make jokes about diversity hires and quota candidates. She witnessed them treat support staff, security guards, and cleaning crews with casual contempt. But she had never experienced their prejudice directly, until today. The irony wasn't lost on her. As she stood in the elevator of her own building, watching the floors tick by toward her penthouse office, Angela reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Born to immigrant parents who ran a small grocery store, she had worked her way through Harvard Business School while managing the family business on weekends. Her first job was at a prestigious investment firm where she was consistently passed over for promotions despite outperforming her peers, so she went out on her own. Her first acquisition was a failing electronics manufacturer that everyone said couldn't be saved. Angela saw something others missed: a brilliant engineer whose innovations were being ignored by management. She bought the company for pennies on the dollar, put the engineer in charge of product development, and sold it 5 years later for 50 times her initial investment. That was her pattern. Find the overlooked, invest in the underestimated, turn invisible potential into undeniable success. By 32, Angela controlled a portfolio worth over $2 billion. Her investment strategy was simple but revolutionary. She looked for companies where talent was being wasted, where innovation was being stifled, where old boys' networks were holding back progress. She would acquire these companies, clear out the dead weight, and unleash the potential that had always been there. Whitmore and Associates had caught her attention for exactly these reasons. Despite having some of the most talented junior associates in the city, their partnership was exclusively white and male. Despite serving clients in cutting-edge industries, their approach to business was stuck in the 1950s. Despite occupying prime real estate in a building Angela had quietly purchased, they acted like they owned the world. She had been patient with them. For 18 months she had watched and waited, hoping they would recognize the need for change on their own. She had sent subtle signals through intermediaries, suggesting they might want to diversify their leadership. She had even arranged for some of their biggest clients to express concerns about the firm's lack of diversity. They had ignored every hint, dismissed every suggestion, and doubled down on their old ways. Today's encounter wasn't planned, but it was illuminating. Angela had simply wanted to observe their morning routine, to see how they treated potential clients. Instead, she had become the client and experienced firsthand the arrogance and bigotry that was slowly destroying her investment. In her office, Angela sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The screen displayed a detailed organizational chart of Whitmore and Associates. Every partner, every associate, every support staff member. Beside it was a financial dashboard showing their quarterly performance, their client retention rates, their mounting debts. She opened another file, a comprehensive report on their biggest clients. Zenith Tech, her own subsidiary, provided 40% of their annual revenue. Morrison Industries, another Chen Holdings company, accounted for another 25%. In total, companies she owned or controlled represented nearly 80% of Whitmore and Associates' business. Angela had always believed in giving people chances to prove themselves, opportunities to grow beyond their limitations. But she also believed in accountability. What had happened downstairs wasn't just personal insult. It was a window into a culture that was toxic, unsustainable, and ultimately self-destructive. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Her finger paused over several names: journalists who would love this story, civil rights lawyers who would turn it into a public crusade, social media influencers who could make it go viral within hours. But Angela Chen hadn't built her empire by seeking public validation or revenge. She had built it by making smart, strategic moves that created lasting change. She opened her calendar and began typing. Tomorrow's schedule would be very different than originally planned. Her assistant knocked and entered with the morning's priority calls. Ms. Chen, you have the Morrison Industries board meeting at 11, lunch with the Zenith Tech leadership team, and the quarterly review with your legal department at 3. Angela looked up from her laptop, her expression calm but her eyes holding a new intensity. Cancel everything. Clear my schedule for the next week. We're going to be very busy restructuring one of our portfolio companies. Which company, Ms. Chen? Angela's smile was small but significant. Whitmore and Associates. I think it's time they met their actual boss. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the mood that was about to descend on Whitmore and Associates. Angela stood at her office window, watching the partners arrive in their luxury cars, completely unaware that their world was about to shift on its axis. She had spent the night making calls, not angry calls seeking immediate revenge, but strategic conversations with the kind of precision that had built her empire. Each call was carefully calculated, each decision part of a larger plan that would unfold with mechanical certainty. At 8:30 a.m. her phone rang. Ms. Chen, it's David Kim from Morrison Industries. We've sent the termination notice to Whitmore and Associates as you requested. They're expecting a meeting at 10 a.m. to discuss urgent contract modifications. Perfect. What about Zenith Tech? Sarah Martinez called their senior partner an hour ago, told them there were serious concerns about representation, and they needed to meet immediately to avoid losing the account. Angela nodded, watching through her window as James Whitmore III stepped out of his Mercedes, adjusting his tie with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him respect. And the others? All 6 of your subsidiary companies have scheduled emergency meetings with them today. By noon, they'll realize they're facing the loss of nearly 80% of their revenue. Down in the lobby, Angela could see the controlled chaos beginning. Partners were arriving early, support staff were scurrying around with unusual urgency, and the receptionist who had dismissed her yesterday was fielding phone call after phone call. At 9 a.m., Angela took the elevator down to the 34th floor, Whitmore and Associates' main conference room level. She positioned herself in the building's coffee shop, which offered a perfect view of their offices through glass walls that the law firm had installed to project transparency and openness. The irony was delicious. She ordered a simple black coffee and settled into a corner table with her laptop. From here, she could watch the morning unfold like a carefully choreographed performance. At 9:15, she saw James Whitmore burst out of the conference room where he'd been meeting with Morrison Industries representatives. Even through the glass, his face was visibly red, his gestures animated with the kind of panic that comes from realizing your biggest client is walking away. At 9:30, Sarah Martinez from Zenith Tech delivered her bombshell. Angela watched as three partners crowded around the conference table, their body language shifting from confident to concerned to borderline desperate as Sarah explained that her company was reevaluating their legal representation due to cultural misalignment. Angela sipped her coffee and opened her laptop. Time for phase 2. She began typing an email to Harrison and Associates, Whitmore's biggest competitor. "Dear Richard," she wrote to the managing partner she had known since business school, "I have a proposition that might interest you. Several of my companies are looking for new legal representation, and I think your firm might be exactly what we need." At 9:45, her phone buzzed. A text from David Kim. "Whitmore just called Morrison Industries directly. He's asking to speak with the CEO. Sounds desperate. Should we take the call?" Angela typed back, "Transfer him to legal. Tell them it's about contract termination procedures." Through the glass wall, she could see the exact moment James Whitmore received that news. He actually staggered backward, grabbing the conference table for support. His associate, a younger man with perfectly styled hair, was frantically taking notes while trying to field another call. At 10 a.m., Angela's phone rang. "Ms. Chen? This is Jennifer Walsh. I'm the office manager at Whitmore and Associates." The woman's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "We've had several of our major clients request emergency meetings today, and there seems to be some kind of coordination. Do you know anything about this?" Angela paused, letting the silence stretch. "I'm sorry, who is this again?" "Jennifer Walsh from Whitmore and Associates. We're on the 34th floor of your building. Our partners were hoping to speak with you about our lease agreement and some potential issues with our clients." "I see. And what makes you think these client issues are related to me?" Another pause. Angela could practically hear the woman's brain working, trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation without admitting what had happened in the lobby yesterday. "Well, several of our clients mentioned they had concerns about cultural alignment. And since you own the building, we thought perhaps you might have some insight into—" "Ms. Walsh," Angela interrupted gently, "I think your partners might want to be more specific about what kind of insight they're looking for. Perhaps they could explain what they think might have caused their clients to suddenly develop these concerns about cultural alignment." The silence stretched so long Angela wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, would you be available for a meeting today? The partners would very much like to speak with you." Angela looked through the glass at the chaos unfolding in the law firm's offices. Partners were running between conference rooms. Associates were pulling files with desperate efficiency, and she could see James Whitmore pacing back and forth while shouting into his phone. "I'm quite busy today," Angela said, her tone pleasant but firm. "But perhaps I could spare some time tomorrow. Say 9 a.m. I believe you have a nice conference room on the 34th floor." Yes, 9 a.m. would be perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Chen. The partners will be very grateful for your time." After hanging up, Angela allowed herself a small smile. Phase 2 complete. She spent the rest of the morning watching the firm's panic intensify. By 11 a.m., they had lost Morrison Industries entirely. By noon, Zenith Tech had officially terminated their contract. One by one, Angela's subsidiary companies delivered the same message: immediate termination of legal services due to concerns about the firm's professional culture. At 12:30, she saw James Whitmore collapse into a chair in the conference room, his head in his hands. His associates were gathered around him like generals planning a desperate last stand. Through the glass, she could see charts and graphs spread across the table, probably their client list, their revenue projections, their survival calculations. Angela closed her laptop and stood up. Tomorrow's meeting would be interesting, but she had one more call to make today. She dialed her head of acquisitions. "Michael, it's Angela. I want you to prepare a complete restructuring proposal for Whitmore and Associates. New leadership, new policies, new culture, everything." "Complete restructuring? That's pretty aggressive, even for us." Angela looked through the glass one more time at James Whitmore, still slumped in defeat while his world crumbled around him. Sometimes aggressive is exactly what's needed. Some people only learn respect when they lose everything they took for granted. Understood. How soon do you need this? Tomorrow morning. Damn sharp. That evening, in her penthouse apartment overlooking the city's glittering skyline, Angela sat in her study surrounded by the artifacts of her journey. The walls were lined with awards she never displayed publicly, framed photos with world leaders who sought her counsel, and degrees from institutions that now competed for her, donations. But on her desk sat something more personal, a faded photograph of a small grocery store with a hand-painted sign reading Chen Family Market. In the picture, a younger Angela stood between her parents, all three of them wearing aprons and tired but hopeful smiles. She picked up the photo, remembering her parents, Li and Wei Chen, had immigrated to America with nothing but dreams and determination. They worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week to keep their small store afloat. Angela grew up behind that counter, doing homework in the back office while her parents served customers who sometimes treated them with casual disrespect, the same kind of dismissive attitude she had encountered yesterday. Worked twice as hard to get half the recognition her father had told her when she was 16, after watching a customer berate her mother over a price difference of 50 cents. But never let them make you smaller than you are. Angela had carried those words through Harvard, where professors praised her surprisingly sophisticated understanding of market dynamics. She had held them close during her first job at Pemberton Investments, where her ideas were regularly credited to male colleagues, and her achievements were dismissed as diversity benefits. The breaking point came during her third year at Pemberton. She had identified a struggling telecommunications company with revolutionary fiber optic patents. Her analysis showed it could be acquired cheaply and transformed into an industry leader within 5 years. She presented the proposal to the partners' meeting, speaking with passion and precision about market opportunities and technological potential. Interesting perspective, Angela, senior partner Charles Pemberton had said with condescending approval. Of course, we'd need someone with more experience to actually handle the acquisition. Perhaps you could assist Derek with the research. Derek Morrison, a Harvard legacy hire who couldn't analyze a balance sheet if his trust fund depended on it, had nodded eagerly. I'd be happy to take point on this, sir. Angela can handle the paperwork. That night, Angela had called her father. Baba, I think I need to leave Pemberton. Are they treating you badly? They're treating me like I'm invisible. Like my ideas don't matter because they came from me. Her father was quiet for a long moment. Then, your mother and I, we stay invisible because we have no choice. But you, Angela, you have choices. Don't let them make you invisible if you don't have to be. 6 months later, Angela resigned from Pemberton and used her savings to make her own bid on the telecommunications company. She mortgaged her apartment, borrowed against her parents' store, and convinced 2 former professors to invest their retirement funds in her vision. The acquisition was brutal. She worked alone from a shared office space, living on instant noodles and surviving on 3 hours of sleep while she rebuilt the company from the ground up. She fired the deadweight executives, promoted the overlooked engineers, and focused the entire operation on developing their patent portfolio. 18 months later, tech giant Verizon acquired her company for $800 million. Angela used the profits to launch Chen Holdings, but she never forgot the lesson. The business world was full of talented people who were invisible simply because they didn't look like the people in power. Her investment strategy became more than financial. It became personal. She looked for companies where brilliant minds were trapped under glass ceilings. She found family-owned businesses where the next generation was being overlooked because of gender or race. She identified startups with revolutionary ideas that couldn't get funding because their founders didn't fit venture capital's narrow demographics, and she made them all successful. By age 30, Angela controlled 12 companies across 6 industries. By 32, her portfolio was worth over $2 billion. But she remained largely unknown to the business press, preferring to let her investments speak for themselves. The photograph on her desk reminded her why. Success is not about being seen, her mother had told her, shortly before passing away from cancer 3 years ago. Success is about lifting others up after you climb. Angela had taken that advice seriously. 60% of her portfolio companies were now led by women or minorities, who had been promoted from within. She had created over 10,000 jobs for people who might otherwise have remained invisible. She had proven again and again that diverse leadership wasn't just morally right. It was incredibly profitable. Whitmore and Associates had been a test case. She had acquired the struggling firm quietly, hoping that gradual pressure might encourage them to evolve. She had watched as talented associates left for competitors, frustrated by a partnership track that seemed designed to exclude them. She had seen brilliant legal minds wasted because they didn't belong to the right country clubs or prep schools. Yesterday's encounter had simply confirmed what she already knew. Some people only learned through consequences, not opportunities. Angela opened her laptop and began typing. Not emails this time, but a detailed plan that would reshape Whitmore and Associates from top to bottom. New partnership structure that prioritized merit over connections. Mentorship programs for young lawyers from underrepresented backgrounds. Client outreach that would bring in business from emerging industries rather than old money firms. But first, she had to deal with the current leadership. At 11 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from her head of security. Ms. Chen, James Whitmore III is in the building lobby. Says he needs to speak with you urgently. Should I send him up? Angela looked at the message for a long moment. Part of her wanted to let him sweat until tomorrow's meeting. But another part, the part that remembered her parents' dignity in the face of disrespect, decided that grace, even undeserved grace, was sometimes the most powerful response. Send him up to my office. But have security wait outside. 5 minutes later, Angela opened her door to find James Whitmore looking nothing like the arrogant man who had dismissed her yesterday. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confident bearing replaced by barely controlled desperation. Ms. Chen, he began, his voice hoarse. We need to talk. Angela stepped aside to let him enter. Yes, Mr. Whitmore, I believe we do. Angela gestured to the chair across from her desk, but James Whitmore remained standing, pacing like a caged animal in her spacious office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled below them, but the tension in the room made the beautiful view feel distant and cold. You're destroying my firm, he said without preamble, his voice raw with exhaustion and panic. In one day, you've cost us nearly 80% of our revenue. My partners are talking about bankruptcy. Associates are already updating their resumes. What do you want from us? Angela settled into her chair, her posture relaxed but her eyes never leaving his face. What do I want? That's an interesting question, Mr. Whitmore. Perhaps you should tell me what you think I want. I don't know. He slammed his hand on her desk, then immediately recoiled as if the outburst surprised him. Money? Some kind of settlement? A public apology? Just tell me what it will take to make this stop. You think this is about money? Angela's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath the silk. Mr. Whitmore, do you have any idea what my net worth is? He stared at her, clearly struggling to process the question. We looked you up after the Morrison Industries meeting. The reports say you control over $2 billion in assets, but that can't be right. I'm what? The question hung in the air like a blade. James Whitmore's mouth opened and closed several times. Angela could see him fighting with himself, trying to find words that wouldn't make his situation worse. Finally, he whispered, You're so young. And you're black? Angela finished for him. A woman? Someone who doesn't look like what you think power should look like. The silence stretched between them. Outside, a police siren wailed in the distance, and the sound seemed to underscore the moment's gravity. Yesterday, Angela continued, her voice growing stronger. When I walked into your lobby, what did you see? Be honest, Whitmore struggled with the admission. I saw someone who didn't belong. Someone who was probably there for a service call or looking for directions or maybe trying to get something for free. You saw a black woman in an expensive suit carrying a designer briefcase, and you immediately assumed she was there to clean your toilets or beg for handouts? Yes. The word came out barely above a whisper. Angela opened her laptop and turned the screen toward him. This is your firm's financial report for the last 18 months. Revenue down 30%. Client retention at historic lows. 3 sexual harassment settlements that never made the news because I made sure they were handled quietly. Would you like to know why your firm is failing, Mr. Whitmore? He leaned forward, squinting at the numbers that spelled out his professional doom. Because you've confused tradition with excellence? Angela continued. You've mistaken exclusivity for quality. You hire from the same schools, promote the same types of people, think the same thoughts, and wonder why you're losing clients to firms that actually represent the diversity of modern business. She pulled up another screen. Your competition, Harrison and Associates, just signed 4 of the contracts you lost today. Want to know their secret? Their partnership is 40% women, 30% minorities. Their associates come from state schools and night programs, not just Ivy League legacy admits, and their revenue has grown 60% in the same period yours has declined 30%. James Whitmore sank into the chair he had refused earlier, his head in his hands. What do you want me to do? I can't change overnight. The partnership structure, the culture, it's been this way for decades. I know, Angela said, and for the first time her voice held a note of something that might have been sympathy. That's exactly the problem. She pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the desk between them. This is a complete restructuring proposal for Whitmore and Associates. New partnership criteria based on merit and performance, not connections and background. Diversity initiatives that aren't just window dressing but actual pathways to leadership. Client development that reaches beyond your current comfortable bubble. Whitmore stared at the folder like it might explode. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, Harrison and Associates will announce they're acquiring your remaining client base and offering positions to any of your associates who meet their standards. Your firm will be dissolved by the end of the month, and your name will be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when tradition becomes discrimination. Angela stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had witnessed her rise from invisible grocery store clerk to corporate power broker. But if you accept this proposal, something interesting happens. She turned back to face him. Your biggest clients return, not because I force them to, but because they want to work with a firm that reflects their values. Your associates stop leaving for competitors because they can see actual paths to advancement. Your reputation shifts from old guard exclusivity to progressive excellence. You're talking about fundamentally changing everything we are. No, Mr. Whitmore. I'm talking about becoming what you could be if you stopped being afraid of people who don't look like you. She returned to her desk and opened another file. Let me show you something else. This is a list of the associates and junior partners at your firm who will be promoted to senior positions under this new structure. James leaned forward, scanning the names. Angela watched his expression change as he recognized the talent that had been right under his nose all along. Patricia Rodriguez has brought in more new business than any associate in your firm's history, but she's been passed over for partnership 3 times. David Kim graduated top of his class at Stanford Law and has won every case he's handled. But somehow he's still doing research for partners who couldn't argue their way out of traffic court. Maria Santos developed the legal strategy that saved your pharmaceutical client from a billion-dollar lawsuit, but her contributions were credited to the partner who signed the brief. Angela closed the laptop. These people aren't just good lawyers, Mr. Whitmore. They're exceptional lawyers who happen to be women, minorities, or both. Under my proposal, they become your new leadership team. And what happens to the current partners? Angela's smile was sharp but not unkind. The ones who can adapt, learn, and grow will remain as partners. The ones who can't, she shrugged. Well, I'm sure they can find positions at firms that still value tradition over talent. James Whitmore stared at the proposal for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes held a mixture of defeat and something that might have been relief. How long do I have to decide? You don't, Angela said simply. You decided yesterday when you told me to use the service entrance. This is just the consequence of that decision. The only choice you have now is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the past. The next morning at 8:55 a.m., Angela stood outside the conference room of Whitmore and Associates, the same glass-walled space where she had watched yesterday's panic unfold. Through the transparent barrier, she could see all 8 senior partners seated around the mahogany table, their faces bearing the grim expressions of men who had spent the night staring into the abyss of professional extinction. James Whitmore sat at the head of the table, the restructuring proposal open before him like evidence in his own trial. To his right, Richard Sterling, the firm's managing partner, shuffled through financial reports with the mechanical movements of a man in shock. The others, Charles Hamilton, Robert Lawson, Peter Davidson, Thomas Bradford, Kenneth Morrison, and William Harper, sat in various stages of defeat and desperation. Angela entered at exactly 9 a.m., her presence immediately commanding the room's attention, Today she wore a navy blue power suit that cost more than most of their monthly salaries. Her confident stride announcing that this was her building, her meeting, and ultimately her decision to make. "Gentlemen," she said, taking the seat at the opposite end of the table from Whitmore. Her briefcase clicked open with authority. "I trust you've had time to review my proposal." The silence was deafening. Angela let it stretch, understanding that sometimes power is best demonstrated through patience rather than words. Finally, Richard Sterling cleared his throat. "Ms. Chen, I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We've been partners in this firm for decades. We've built relationships, established traditions. You've built a monument to mediocrity," Angela interrupted, her voice cutting through his platitudes like a blade. "Mr. Sterling, in the past 5 years, your personal client retention rate is 43%. The industry average is 78%. Would you like to explain that disparity?" Sterling's face flushed red. "Client relationships are complex. Sometimes personality conflicts. Angela pulled out a tablet and swiped to a prepared screen. "Is that what you called it when Patterson Industries terminated your services after you referred to their Korean-American CEO as one of those tech types who probably doesn't understand real American business?" The color drained from Sterling's face. "That was taken out of context. Was it also taken out of context when you told Apex Manufacturing's female CFO that numbers are a man's game and suggested she might want to focus on the company's charity work instead?" Angela looked around the table, watching each partner realize that she knew things about them they had never imagined anyone would discover. "Or when you advised Thompson Construction that they shouldn't worry about diversity requirements because those kinds of workers don't really want these jobs anyway?" Charles Hamilton leaned forward aggressively. "Now just a minute here. You can't just come in and, 'I can do exactly what I'm doing, Mr. Hamilton, because I own this firm.'" Angela's voice remained steady, but the words hit the room like a physical blow. "I have owned Whitmore and Associates for 18 months. I am not a client, a vendor, or a visitor. I am your boss. And yesterday you treated your boss like she was there to empty your trash cans." The silence that followed was absolute. Angela could hear the building's air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic 40 floors below, and what sounded like someone's stomach actually growling from nervous tension. Robert Lawson spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "You own us?" "Chen Holdings acquired this firm in March of last year when you were facing bankruptcy after the Meridian Industries lawsuit." Angela pulled out a legal document and placed it on the table. "You were hemorrhaging clients, facing 3 sexual harassment suits, and about to lose your lease on this building. My acquisition saved your jobs, your reputation, and your careers." She stood and walked to the window, her back to the stunned partners. "I could have cleaned house immediately. Fired every partner, dissolved the firm, and started fresh. Instead, I chose to give you a chance to evolve naturally. I provided financial stability, sent you new clients through my subsidiary companies, and waited to see if you would recognize the need for change on your own." When she turned back to face them, her expression was calm but implacable. "Instead, you doubled down on your worst impulses. You rejected qualified candidates who didn't fit your narrow demographic. You lost clients because you couldn't understand their changing values. And yesterday you treated me exactly the way you've been treating talented people all along, as if they were invisible, insignificant, and unworthy of basic respect." Thomas Bradford, the oldest partner at 62, found his voice. "Ms. Chen, we had no idea who you were. If you had known I owned this firm, you would have treated me differently," Angela finished. "But you would have treated the next black woman who walked through that door exactly the same way you treated me. And that, Mr. Bradford, is precisely the problem." She returned to her seat and opened her briefcase. "Let me show you what your ignorance has cost you." Angela spread out a series of documents across the table. "These are contract termination letters from every major client you've lost in the past 18 months. Morrison Industries, Zenith Tech, Apex Manufacturing, Patterson Industries, Thompson Construction, Meridian Financial. Want to know what they all have in common?" The partners leaned forward, studying the documents with the desperation of drowning men reaching for life preservers. "Every single one of these companies is owned or controlled by Chen Holdings. Every major client relationship you thought was independent was actually flowing through my network. The legal fees you've been collecting, the prestigious cases you've been handling, The reputation that kept this firm afloat, all of it has been subsidized by me. Peter Davidson's hands were literally shaking as he held one of the termination letters. But why? Why would you do this to your own investment? Angela's laugh was sharp and humorless. Do this to my investment? Mr. Davidson, I've been trying to save my investment. I've been sending you clients, maintaining your cash flow, and hoping you would develop the wisdom to change before I was forced to change you. She pulled out her tablet and showed them a comprehensive financial projection. Under current management, this firm will be profitable for maybe 2 more years before your reputation finally catches up with your reality. Under my restructuring proposal, you'll be the most successful legal practice in the city within 5 years. James Whitmore finally spoke, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. Ms. Chen, what exactly do you want from us? Angela looked at each of them in turn, her gaze steady and uncompromising. I want you to understand what happened yesterday wasn't just about me. It was about Patricia Rodriguez, who's been passed over for partnership 3 times despite bringing in more business than any associate in your history. It was about David Kim, who wins every case but somehow never gets credit for his strategic brilliance. It was about Maria Santos, who saved your pharmaceutical client from bankruptcy, but watched a white male partner take credit for her work. She stood again, her presence filling the room. It was about every talented person you've dismissed, overlooked or underestimated because they didn't look like you, sound like you, or come from the same privileged background as you. But most of all, Angela continued, her voice growing stronger, it was about the fact that in 2025, you still think success means keeping people out, rather than bringing excellence in. William Harper, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally found his voice. What happens to us? If we accept this restructuring, where does that leave the current partners? Angela sat back down and folded her hands on the table. That depends entirely on whether you can learn, adapt, and grow. The partners who embrace change, who mentor the next generation of leaders, who help build a truly excellent firm, they'll thrive under the new structure. Her expression hardened slightly. The partners who continue to believe that diversity is somehow a threat to quality, who think mentoring women and minorities is beneath them, who can't see talent unless it comes wrapped in familiar packaging, well, they'll find themselves politely but firmly transition to emeritus status. The room fell silent again. Angela could see the mental calculations happening behind their eyes. Pride versus survival, tradition versus evolution, comfort versus growth. I need to know right now, she said, which of you are willing to be part of building something better, and which of you are going to cling to a system that's already failed. She looked at James Whitmore first. Mr. Whitmore, you have the most to lose and the most to gain. Your name is on this firm. What's it going to be? Whitmore stared down at the restructuring proposal for what felt like an eternity. When he looked up, his eyes held something Angela hadn't seen before, genuine humility. Ms. Chen, he said slowly, I was wrong yesterday. Not just about you, but about everything I thought I knew about what makes a law firm successful. If you're willing to teach us how to be better, then I'm willing to learn. Angela nodded once, then turned to the others. And the rest of you? One by one, each partner voiced their agreement. Some with enthusiasm, others with resignation, but all of them ultimately choosing evolution over extinction. Good, Angela said, closing her briefcase with finality. Then let's begin rebuilding this firm the right way. 6 months later, Angela walked through the same marble lobby of Whitmore and Associates, but everything had changed. The reception desk was now staffed by Marcus Johnson, a sharp-eyed recent graduate from Howard Law, who greeted every visitor with genuine professionalism and warmth. The portraits of stern-faced white partners had been replaced with images showcasing the firm's diverse team and their community involvement. Good morning, Ms. Chen, Marcus said with a smile that reached his eyes. Ms. Rodriguez is waiting for you in conference room A. Angela nodded her thanks and walked toward the elevators, passing associates and partners who represented the full spectrum of American talent. The conversations she overheard were about legal strategies, client needs, and innovative approaches to complex problems, not golf scores and country club gossip. In conference room A, Patricia Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, leading a strategy session with 3 junior associates, Now a senior partner, Patricia had transformed from the overlooked associate who used to handle other partners' research into the firm's star rainmaker. Her confidence filled the room as she outlined their approach to a landmark discrimination case. The key, Patricia was saying to her team, is understanding that this isn't just about legal precedent. This is about changing how entire industries think about inclusion and opportunity. Angela paused in the doorway, remembering the defeated woman she had first observed 6 months ago. Brilliant but invisible, capable but unrecognized. The transformation was remarkable. "Ms. Chen," Patricia called out, noticing her arrival. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing the Meridian Industries case strategy." "Don't let me interrupt," Angela replied, taking a seat at the side of the room. "I'm here to observe, not interfere." The meeting continued with the kind of intellectual energy that had been missing from Whitmore and Associates for years. David Kim presented a constitutional argument that was both innovative and bulletproof. Maria Santos outlined a discovery strategy that would expose systemic discrimination across multiple companies. Jennifer Wu, a first-year associate who had been hired from a state school, asked probing questions that challenged their assumptions and strengthened their approach. After the meeting, Patricia walked Angela to her old office, now transformed into a mentorship center where senior associates worked directly with promising law students from underrepresented backgrounds. "How are the partners adjusting?" Angela asked as they walked through corridors that hummed with productive activity. Patricia's smile was diplomatic but honest. "Most of them are genuinely trying. James Whitmore has become one of our strongest advocates for the mentorship program. Richard Sterling is still learning, but he's putting in the effort. We've had to transition 3 partners to emeritus status, but they're doing consulting work and seem relieved, actually." They paused outside what had once been the exclusive partners' dining room, now converted into a collaborative workspace where lawyers at all levels work together on complex cases. "And the business results? Beyond our most optimistic projections," Patricia replied, pulling out her tablet to show Angela the latest financial reports. "Revenue is up 120% from last year. Client retention is at 94%. We've landed 12 major new accounts, including 3 Fortune 100 companies that specifically chose us because of our reputation for diverse leadership." Angela scrolled through the data, nodding with satisfaction. "What about recruitment? We've gone from getting applications from the same 5 law schools to receiving resumes from the top candidates at 43 institutions. Harvard and Yale graduates are competing for positions alongside brilliant lawyers from Howard, UCLA, and state schools across the country. Our intern program has a waiting list." They continued walking, past offices where partners who had once seemed destined for irrelevance were now thriving under the new system. Charles Hamilton, who had initially resisted the changes most strongly, was deep in conversation with a Latina associate about environmental law strategy. His transformation from entitled partner to engaged mentor had been one of the most surprising developments. "There's something else," Patricia said as they approached the conference room where Angela's transformation of the firm had begun. "We've been invited to present at the National Bar Association's annual conference about our diversity initiative. Law schools are asking us to speak about inclusive hiring practices. 3 other firms have asked us to consult on their own restructuring efforts." Angela paused outside the conference room, looking through the glass at the space where 8 terrified partners had once sat, facing the consequences of their prejudice and narrow thinking. Now it was filled with lawyers of all backgrounds, collaborating on cases that would shape American jurisprudence for decades. "There's something I need to tell you," Angela said, turning to Patricia. "Chen Holdings is launching a legal fellowship program, full scholarships for law students from underrepresented communities, plus guaranteed summer internships at firms like this one." Patricia's eyes widened. "Angela, that's incredible." "How many fellowships?" 50 per year to start. We're calling it the Invisible Excellence Initiative." Angela's smile held both pride and determination, because there are brilliant minds everywhere, Patricia. In small towns and big cities, in community colleges and state schools, in families that never imagined their children could become lawyers. We're going to find them, train them, and place them in positions where they can change the world. They walked toward the lobby, passing the coffee shop where Angela had once observed the firm's panic from a distance. Now it was filled with lawyers from multiple floors, building the kind of cross-departmental relationships that generated innovative legal strategies. "You know what the most remarkable thing is?" Patricia asked as they reached the elevator. "6 months ago, this firm was dying because it couldn't see past its own limitations. Now it's thriving because it finally learned to recognize excellence wherever it comes from." Angela pressed the button for the 42nd floor, where her own office continued to oversee not just this transformation, but dozens of others across her portfolio companies. "Patricia, can I ask you something? If someone had told you a year ago that you'd be a senior partner at a top-tier law firm, leading landmark cases and mentoring the next generation of lawyers, what would you have said?" Patricia was quiet for a moment, considering. "I would have said it was impossible, that people like me don't get opportunities like that." And now, the elevator doors opened and Patricia stepped out with the confidence of someone who had finally found her place in the world. "Now I know that impossible just meant I was in the wrong place, working for the wrong people." As the doors closed, Angela reflected on the truth Patricia had unknowingly revealed. Change was always possible. Growth was always achievable. Excellence was always waiting to be recognized. Sometimes it just took the right person, in the right position, at the right moment, to make the impossible inevitable. 1 year after that humiliating morning in the lobby, Angela stood before a packed auditorium at the National Legal Conference, looking out at an audience of lawyers, law students, and legal professionals who had come to hear about the Whitmore transformation. The story had become legendary in legal circles, not just as a tale of corporate restructuring, but as a masterclass in recognizing and unleashing hidden potential. "The question I'm asked most often," Angela began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "is whether I planned what happened that morning. The truth is, I planned to observe. I planned to learn. I planned to make gradual changes that would help a struggling firm find its way to excellence." She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the audience. "What I didn't plan was to experience firsthand the casual cruelty of assumptions. I didn't plan to be dismissed, demeaned, and treated as invisible by people who worked for me. But in retrospect, I'm grateful it happened that way." The auditorium was completely silent, every person leaning forward to catch her words. "Because sometimes we need to see the problem clearly before we can solve it completely. That morning showed me that incremental change wasn't enough. Cultural transformation required something more dramatic, more immediate, more decisive." Angela clicked to a slide showing Whitmore and Associates' current team photo, dozens of lawyers representing every demographic, every background, every path to success. Today, Whitmore and Associates is the most profitable law firm in the city, not despite its diversity, but because of it. When you stop limiting your talent pool to familiar faces and comfortable backgrounds, you discover that excellence comes in forms you never imagined. Another slide appeared, showing statistics from the firm's remarkable year, record revenues, perfect client retention, landmark case victories, and national recognition for legal innovation. But the real success isn't measured in dollars or awards. It's measured in opportunities created, barriers broken, and young people who now see paths that didn't exist before. It's measured in partners who learned to grow beyond their limitations and associates who no longer have to be invisible to be employed. Angela's final slide was simple. A photo of that original Chen family market, with her parents smiling beside their hand-painted sign. "My parents taught me that dignity isn't something you give to people. It's something you recognize in people. Every person walking through your door, regardless of how they look or where they come from, deserves to be seen for who they truly are." She closed her laptop and looked directly at the audience. "The next time someone assumes they know what you're capable of based on what you look like, remember that their assumptions say everything about their limitations and nothing about your potential." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But more importantly, it launched a movement that would transform how legal firms and companies across America thought about talent, opportunity, and the incredible power of making the invisible visible.